Welcome to the Sci-Fi Evolution channel. You can't laugh during a telepathic interrogation, but I couldn't help myself. Second Lieutenant Grayson Kane later told the Aurelia crew about this meeting, and the story became a popular story in cosmonauts' bars. But at that moment, there was nothing funny about sitting strapped to a semi-organic chair on a Sidral intelligence ship, while a dozen eyes studied you as if you were an interesting puzzle. The She-Lore have met many human captives before, but none had a voice like yours. The room was filled with ozone, and something else Grayson couldn't identify. Thin tentacles hung from the ceiling, moving like those of a jellyfish, and each one made a soft hum, as if it were alive. A tall figure approached, her translucent skin slightly glowing with a bioluminescent liquid. She had no mouth, just a smooth face with three wide eyes that never blinked. The alien's voice entered his mind without permission. It was a subtle but intrusive pressure that made him grit his teeth. "We're starting," the alien said right into his thoughts, the words forming without sound. "Don't resist. We'll understand." Grayson didn't answer out loud, because what was the point? But in his head, the usual stream of comments was already in full swing. "Oh great, another one like that. As if the past wasn't enough. Do they even realize how uncomfortable this chair is? Seriously, who makes furniture with spikes on the back? If I ever get out of here, I'll file a complaint." The alien's presence deepened in his mind. It peeled away layers of memory, seeking order, clarity, and clean data. But instead of a calm, controlled thought, it stumbled upon a chaotic river of mental noise. Grayson's inner voice never stopped. He chatted about his last meal, hummed a half-forgotten tune, and replayed a silly joke his roommate had told him 3 days ago. And he wondered how long ago someone had changed the air filter on this ship. He was worried that he had missed the day of washing on the Aurelia, and recalled how his drill instructor was shouting about socks. For no apparent reason, he imagined a cartoon cow riding a bicycle. The alien reacted slightly, but his facial expression remained unchanged, and his mental tone sharpened. "It's fragmented. Your thought process is devoid of coherence. Stop interfering." Grayson almost laughed again. "I'm not doing this on purpose, buddy. That's just how people think," he thought, aiming his words like arrows at the alien penetrating his mind. "What exactly are you looking for?" he asked. "Are you looking for numbers, secrets, or are you trying to untangle this mess and put it in order?" There was a pause, and then a stronger wave of mental intrusion, as images other than his own flashed through his mind. Sterile alien designs of data diagrams, structured paths of logic, and neatly twisted strands of memory. The alien froze, trying to sort out the incessant chatter in his mind. However, his thoughts kept jumping from one to the other, bouncing like pebbles on the surface of a pond. The alien, feeling hungry, thirsty, and unfamiliar, wondered if he knew what pizza was. Did he lock his locker before he was moved here? Is he listening to this? The alien's voice sounded strained again. Why is there no silence? His mind must produce thoughts, one after the other, in a logical sequence. Why is there a voice? He's talking, but he's not there. Grayson chuckled, despite the fact that the room was full of aliens staring at him. This time he said it out loud. "That's just me saying, buddy. People do this all the time. It's like talking to yourself in your head. You can't turn it off." Sidral tilted his head, processing the words while still searching in his mind. He didn't understand. There was a clear and quiet process of signals and outputs among the Sidrils. The alien penetrates deeper, curious and passionate, going through the surface thoughts to discover deeper layers. But there is no silence. More voices, more mental comments, arguments between different versions of himself, discussing whether he can escape or whether the aliens will feed him something unpleasant afterwards. He stumbles upon a memory of Grayson when he was 12 years old, being scolded for dropping a sandwich on the floor, which triggered a cascade of memories. School fights, old training exercises, and more. When Grayson couldn't catch the shuttle, he was preoccupied with trivial thoughts. He smiled as his head began to throb from the commotion. "I told you," he muttered. "It's always so noisy here. People are always chatting upstairs. Sometimes it can be useful. Sometimes it's just noise, but it's always there." Across the room, other aliens were exchanging silent communication signals, their mental tones betraying confusion. This human phenomenon was unprecedented, undocumented among the hundreds of species they had encountered before. The thought should be data, but it wasn't data. It was a storm of self-awareness, a storm of questions turning into even more questions, comments layered on instinct, layered on memory. The alien telepath recoiled slightly, shocked by the sheer complexity of what he had discovered. Grayson leaned his head back against the spikes of the chair, grinning tiredly. "So what's the verdict?" he asked. "Do you still think you can understand me?" The alien did not respond immediately. For the first time in his long life, he was silent. He didn't have a ready explanation for what he was facing. Human minds weren't pure streams of data. They were alive in a way that defied logic, full of voices that only they could hear. The Sidrolov intelligence ship changed its lighting, darkening the glowing threads above, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Grayson was slouched in an organic chair, wrists still pinched, legs bound at the ankles. Still, he looked more comfortable than his captors. Across from him, the main telepath hovered closer, his translucent skin rippling as complex pulses of bioluminescent color danced beneath it. The alien's voice returned, quieter this time, as if he had chosen his words more carefully. "Man, you don't represent thoughts as a stable pattern. It's chaos, it's noise. Explain that inner voice," Grayson snorted. "Explain it? It's just the way we are. My brain talks to me about everything all the time. Half of what's out there doesn't matter, just like it does now. Some of it doesn't even make sense. I'm wondering if your ship has gravity plates, or if it's some kind of strange magnetism. I also want to remember if I turned off the coffee maker before the last mission. Nothing stops just because you dig in." The alien's mind touched mine again, this time carefully, searching for structure. But each layer revealed the same thing. Random thoughts, memories, encountering imaginary scenarios, and occasional flashes of humor. Even in captivity, the alien found a thread where Grayson imagined himself leaving this place with a sandwich in his hand, another where he argued with himself about what should be in a sandwich, and underneath that, a random mental image of a wrench floating in zero gravity for no apparent reason. "You're processing thoughts inefficiently," the alien said. "It's wasteful. There are fragments that are not related to immediate survival or completing the task. Why don't you control them?" Grayson shrugged as much as his limitations would allow. "Because we are human beings. We think about everything at once. The past, the future, things that don't matter, things that might someday matter. It's like having a conversation with yourself that never ends. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's just noise, but that's us." The other Sidrils in the cell were flashing signals back and forth, their minds vibrating in a silent exchange that Grayson couldn't decipher. The chief pressed forward again, trying to use a different tactic. There was a sudden rush of alien clarity into his skull, clean, linear, like a computer compiling data. "Watch this. That's a thought." The alien projected a simple problem into his mind. Calculation of trajectory and mass, solved instantly, quietly, without comment. Smooth, efficient, and deviant. Grayson laughed out loud. "Yes, we don't do that. Watch this." He deliberately pondered the same problem, his mind filled with a mental argument about whether to round the numbers or keep them accurate while humming an unrelated tune. During the calculation, he doubted every step. Even when he came to the same answer, He relived the memory of his math teacher throwing chalk at him years ago. "See, we came to this anyway, but with a lot more talking along the way." The alien recoiled again, this time from something unexpected. In the midst of Grayson's mental noise, there was a sudden thread of doubt. Not about the math problem, but about his chances of getting out of there alive. Along with the jokes and nonsense, there was fear and determination, a strategy quietly forming under the chatter. The alien expected chaos to mean weakness, but it was something else. Human thoughts were a battlefield where hundreds of voices constantly fought, honing ideas, questioning assumptions, finding cracks in walls where no clean, orderly mind would ever look. The alien tried again, focusing on extracting information about the roots of human military technology. But Grayson's thoughts were too strong and chaotic to break through them. Grayson slid aside. As soon as he touched on the question, his inner voice drowned him out, replaying an old campfire story about space whales, arguing whether they were real, imagining what they might look like in hats, and then suddenly veered into a memory of playing cards with his squad. The real answer to the alien's question disappeared into the noise, buried under a million irrelevant distractions. The disappointment seeped through the telepathic connection. Grayson's mind resists the structure. His thoughts cannot be separated cleanly. How does his kind function without order? She-lore shifted uncomfortably. Their shared network pulsed with uncertainty. For them, thought was order, logic, and silence, except when conclusions were reached. This man's mental noise was not a disadvantage, but rather a strength. The She-lore did not allow Grayson to rise from his chair. The scientists surrounded Grayson like a team of mathematicians working on a complex equation, their eyes glowing with a faint light as they silently communicated with each other. More psychic beings were summoned, their tall, ethereal forms sliding into the room, each adding their own unique psychic abilities to the task. Grayson felt the pressure increase, as if dozens of invisible fingers were rummaging through his thoughts. He winced but didn't flinch. Instead, his inner voice continued to fill his head with noise, this time at a rapid rate. "Don't scratch your nose," he thought. "It's too late. It itches. I wonder if they can feel itchy too. Probably. This is strange. He should think about the lunch menu at Aurelia. Do they still serve that awful protein pasta today? Probably not. Why do they call it beef-flavored if no one has ever seen a cow in space?" The main alien delved into his memory, searching for patterns, command protocols, fleet positions, and human vulnerabilities. When the memory surfaced, it was accompanied by a comment. As Grayson's thoughts turned to his experience navigating starships, his mind filled with thoughts of uncomfortable seats on long-haul flights, followed by vivid dreams of replacing navigation consoles with coffee machines. When the aliens stopped, their psychic communication was filled with static confusion, and Grayson's inner voice began to tell an absurd story. It was about a training camp where a drill instructor shouted meaningless slogans, his roommate fell asleep standing up, and the time when someone started a rumor about an alien stew in the cafeteria. The main telepath projected sharply. "Your stream of thoughts does not stop. You're deliberately mixing signal and noise." Grayson smiled wryly. Not intentionally. It's just the way his brain works, he thought. His mind is like a bar fight with a jukebox in the corner, while the aliens were trying something new, a synchronized effort to understand each other. A surge of psychic energy ran through him. Several minds converged, trying to divide his consciousness, silence the noise, extract clean data. But every time they pressed, his inner voice shifted, multiplied, spewing nonsense through a mental connection like smoke bombs. One layer of his mind hummed a marching tune. The other retold the events in the third person, as if he were telling a story. Another one was discussing whether the skin was slippery or smooth to the touch. And underneath it all, the real escape plans were twisting and changing, elusive as fog. The young alien approached, his mental tone hesitant. "Why are you talking to yourself?" he asked. "No other species does this." Grayson shrugged his shoulders. "It's not about the goal," he replied. "It's just happening. It helps us to think. It helps us to cope. Sometimes it keeps us sane. Sometimes it drives us crazy. But it's always there, every second." The alien leaned closer, more gently this time. This time, he touched on something unexpected. Grayson paused. Doubts, old remorse, brief flashes of guilt over failed missions. The moments that he would like to cancel, but even they are gone. His mind was arguing with itself. One voice accused, another defended, and another joked to defuse the situation. Sheilor recoiled, startled by the internal debate. For their kind, errors were recorded, analyzed, and stored in silence. For this man, every failure was a live conversation that never stopped. The main alien finally asked, "How are you dealing with all this noise? How do you make decisions when your mind never rests?" Grayson smiled faintly. "Because the voices argue until one wins. We imagine everything that can go wrong. Everything that can go wrong. Sometimes things that don't make sense at all. And somewhere in this chaos there is a choice. He may not be perfect, but he's ours." There was a moment of silence. Then the aliens tried again. They were more determined this time. Analytically, they created a mental maze, a test designed to evaluate logical thinking. They expected human confusion. Grayson's mind plunged into it, immediately filling the corridors with extraneous thoughts, wildly guessing, questioning the rules, inventing new ones, disassembling the structure until the puzzle dissolved into a chaotic mess of humor and stubborn determination. In the end, he solved it by accident, blurting out the answer in a mental flash while half of his thoughts were focused on his hunger. The aliens were amazed. Efficiency was important to them. Orderly minds have never worked this way. Yet this chaos has found a path that no pure system would consider. Grayson leaned back as far as his restraints would allow, a lazy smile spreading across his face. "See, that's why you can't read us like a book. You think we're messy, but sometimes disorder wins." The sideral network buzzed uncomfortably, mental signals flying between them. What they were facing was not a mess. It was an unpredictability. It was a limitless potential, a mindset that defied containment or categorization. The more they tried to limit it, the more it multiplied. This human intelligence was not a river that could be crossed. It was a storm that could never have been foreseen, controlled, or silenced. Grayson sensed their hesitation and deliberately allowed a new idea to appear, sending it through a psychic link as a signal. "If you plan to read our minds to defeat us, you're going to have a hard time," he thought. There was silence in the room, though a dozen sideral were still circling Grayson like uncertain predators. Their bioluminescent patterns flickered randomly, which was a clear sign that their team was divided and unsure of their next move. The head telepath approached again, his mental tone tense but curious. "Your mental storm defies any order. No one we met had this anomaly. He cannot be silenced or transferred. And yet you claim that this is not intentional." Grayson tilted his head and grinned just enough to be annoying. "Not intentionally, but useful," he replied. "Absolutely. You came with the expectation of just turning a switch in my head and getting everything you wanted. However, you have embarked on a journey that you never expected." Grayson let his thoughts wander, leaving the other telepaths confused and disappointed. Deliberately, Grayson wandered through the labyrinthine corridors of his mind. He engaged in a mental debate about which sandwich was better, peanut butter or ham, and then conjured up a vivid image of drawing a mustache on the face of the main alien. The psychic link conveyed everything unfiltered. Several telepaths instinctively retreated, stunned by the sheer absurdity. But beneath the surface of the banter and nonsense, Grayson's thoughts took a deeper turn. He analyzed their rhythm and watched as they penetrated his mind, waiting for a direct path to information. Therefore, he deliberately built mental mazes. Every time they probed, his thoughts branched into arguments, sarcasm, wild flights of fancy, and sudden flashes of unrelated memories. The truth of everything they were looking for was buried under the cacophony of competing voices, and the more they pressed, the more chaotic it became. Finally, the main alien's tone sharpened. "This noise is endless. We can't get into it. Why do we need clarity?" Grayson asked, leaning forward in his restraints. His voice was firm. "We don't need clarity to survive. We need opportunities. You think that thinking is just logic, a linear process from start to finish. But we think differently. We argue, we discuss, we imagine things that may never happen. And sometimes this nonsense saves lives. The correct answer may not be what a logical mind could come up with." He paused, letting it settle in before continuing. "That's why you can't fully understand us, predict us. You thought you could read my mind, but people are like storms. You can't control them. You can only try to navigate them." The Shilor collective was in turmoil, their once unified thoughts now scattered. They spent centuries reading the minds of other species, analyzing them as thoroughly as they could. The stars were mapped. They had never encountered something that refused to be solved before. The man's endless voice wasn't just a hindrance. It was a completely alien form of consciousness that no psychic could conquer without getting lost in the chaos. Grayson sensed their hesitation and gave one last mental push, allowing his thoughts to swell into a cacophony. Thousands of words, questions, jokes, plans, regrets, fantasies, and fragmented arguments all screamed and whispered at the same time, an unstoppable river of knowledge. He imagined escape routes, bluffing strategies, even ridiculous nonsense, such as setting fire to the floor of a sentient ship with imaginary matches. He created chaos so loud that several telepaths retreated completely, severing their connection with a shudder. The main alien lingered for a moment longer before retreating. His voice finally sounded flat and resigned. "Human, you're unreadable. We cannot extract what we are looking for. The mind is a realm of chaos, and liberation is preferable to continued imprisonment." The shackles fell off without fanfare. Grayson stood up, rubbing his wrists, and looked at the aliens calmly for a long time. As he had warned them from the beginning, they would not like what they found. He slowly approached the hatch, waiting for a trap, but nothing materialized. The side drills remained motionless, their lights dimmer than before. When he passed through the threshold, he looked back once. "If you ever try to do this to another person again, bring earplugs for your brains." The ship's corridor enveloped him, a long, pulsating tunnel leading to the docking bay where his shuttle was waiting for him. He didn't look back a second time. Behind him, the telepaths hovered in awkward silence, replaying an experience they couldn't forget. They didn't just fail to gather intelligence. They saw a form of thinking that could not be predicted or controlled, a mental storm that rewrote their understanding of cognition itself. Grayson entered his shuttle and took his seat as the pilot. When the engines warmed up, his thoughts returned to where they had always been. He wondered if they were still staring at the wall, trying to figure him out. Maybe they're discussing him now. Wouldn't that be fun? He considered telling the command about it, but they might not believe him. After this mission, he intended to take a sandwich. He chuckled to himself, and the sound echoed through the empty cabin as he took off from the intelligence ship's compartment. The stars stretched out before him, endless and silent, but his mind was anything but calm. The alien had discovered something important that day. Something Grayson knew deep inside: there was a universe of noise in every human mind, unreadable and uncontrollable.